All right. Good morning, everybody. This is Event Trader here. We are coming on Monday, March 24th here to talk with our policy analyst, of course, Carmine Ateo. So, Carmine, how are you doing this morning?
Oh, pretty good, Gavin. How was your weekend?
It was good. It was good. Just kind of running around and trying to take care of a few things, watching some hoops and stuff like that, like a lot of other people, I'm sure. How about yourself?
Yeah, pretty good. Watched the games. It was my mom's birthday, so we went out to dinner, and that was about it. Played some poker, and pretty busy kind of overall.
How are the tables looking these days?
They're pretty good. Very busy. But this is like the end of nearing the end of the golden time. I think after Easter, kind of usually get into warmer weather, and things kind of slow down a little bit. I expect so.
Tax returns are being lost as well at this
Yeah,
point.
yeah. The extra spending money is kind of going away, and so I expect things to slow down a little bit. But yeah, things are so good so far.
All right. Well, one place where things aren't slowing down here is, of course, the tariff headlines, Carmine, right? So, I guess with that Section 232, we've talked a lot about it, how these can be taken on and off pretty easily. Doesn't make uh, planning your business any easier, though. So, again, we'll be curious to see how that plays out in the Q1 earnings season coming up here. But let's try to get down to where we stand heading in towards Liberation Day for April 2nd. Of course, that's when these reciprocal tariffs are set to go into play. So, why don't you try to connect all the dots for us so we know exactly where we stand right now, Carmine?
Yeah, so Bloomberg reported over the weekend that the April 2nd reciprocal tariffs will be more targeted than originally thought. They said there's not going to be sector-specific tariffs on cars or semiconductors and things like that go into effect April 2nd. It's just basically tariffs on a broad range of goods, but targeted at specific countries that are the most biggest trade deficits. So, like for example, Scott Besson was quoted in the article. There was a Wall Street Journal article, and there was a Bloomberg article. In the Wall Street Journal article, Scott Besson was quoted in that one, where he talked about what he called the 15, kind of a
The
biggest
Dirty 15,
the
I believe it was
dirty
called.
15. He calls it, which are kind of what he considers as the 15 worst trade abusers. And so the Wall Street Journal had a few of those listed here. So they had, let's see here, they listed,
Yeah, I have
let's
the
see,
whole list here. I'll take a
yeah,
quick.
Australia, Brazil, Canada, China, EU, India, Japan, South Korea, Mexico, Russia, Vietnam. So that's 12 right there. So I'm not sure who the other three are, but maybe the EU encompasses of more than the 15 there. Uh, so it that's kind of like what they're kind of targeting, and basically what they're going to say is, okay, let's say Canada charges 50% tariff on dairy products. We're going to charge them a 50% tariff on a comparable good. If Europe charges 15% tariff on Chevys that come to Europe, we're going to charge them a 15% tariff on their Volkswagens that come to the
How,
U.S.
how does that work, though? Because, I mean, a lot of their Volkswagens are produced in the U.S., right? So, I
Right.
mean,
Yeah, so if they're produced in the U.S., they won't have a tariff, but the parts that come from other countries will. So let's say, for example, you have a car, right? Let's say you have a Volkswagen, a Beetle, right? And it's actually assembled, I think, in Tennessee. But a lot of the parts come from Europe. A lot of the parts come from Mexico. So those will be tariffed as they come in. But if the actual car is produced in the U.S., then that car won't have a tariff on its own. But if there's a car that gets shipped over, let's say hypothetically speaking, there's a different model of a Volkswagen that's all made in Europe, and that gets shipped over here, then that would be tariffed at a similar rate to whatever Europe charges on Chevys coming over, or Chevrolets or Fords or whatever coming over to Europe. So basically, just matching tariff for tariff. And there's a lot of unknown details right now about exactly what this will encompass, but according to these articles, is a little bit more broad, a little less broad than was expected, and that's why you're seeing the market reaction. I would note that there's still a lot of unknowns too regarding the China, Mexico, and China tariffs, right? Because remember, you had uh, the China tariffs were up to 20%. A lot of people kind of forgot about those, I think there's a lot of focus more on these reciprocal tariffs and the China Mexico tariffs, but the Canada Mexico tariffs. Remember, those were suspended until April 2nd for USMCA goods. So it's still unknown if those are going to come back or not. But to me, it makes more sense in a way. No, they could do whatever they want. Obviously, it doesn't. They don't have to do what makes sense. Um, it, but to me, it makes more sense that if they want to do the reciprocal tariffs, that they don't have the other flat tariff on top of it, right? Because let's say, for example, you have the 25% Canada tariff, but there's some things in Canada that are tariffed at 10%. You can't have a 25% tariff on everything if you're going to have a 10% tariff on some things, right? So I think it makes more sense if they're going to do the reciprocal tariffs, and that's why they're kind of dropping the other industry specific ones. But we'll see if that is what the administration did. I kind of mentioned that a couple weeks ago, and I thought that might happen, but we'll see what really happens. Again, these are just press reports. I think it's notable that Trump hasn't come out and said this is wrong. I'm sure he's seeing the news on this, and if it was wrong, I guarantee you he probably would have been sending out a Truth Social post saying that that this is fake news or these guys don't know what they're talking about or whatever. So he hasn't done that yet. So I think that's notable. The next time we're going to hear from the president is at 2 o'clock today. He's having an event with the Louisiana governor about a Hyundai investment. That probably won't be that big of a deal, but I think one of the reasons why I want to point that out is because at these events he's often asked questions about other topics that are not talking about the event. So he might get asked about the tariffs, he might about these Wall Street Journal reports and these Bloomberg reports, and he might use that as an opportunity to comment on it. So if you're trading, keep an eye out about 2 p.m. because there might be some headlines that kind of jar things one way or another here, depending on how he answers the question about these reports. I'm sure he'll be asked about that. So keep an eye out on that. But yeah, again, there's a lot of unknowns. But the bottom line is, I think that the 30-15, so to speak. That's a little bit more narrow than every country in the world, but those are just very significant trading partners, nevertheless. So it's still going to be a very high amount of tariffs that go into effect. The industry specific ones are usually looks like those are going to be emitted if these reports are accurate. But we'll see what happens on April 2nd.
All right, Carmine. So, again, there's been talking about carve outs for certain industries, automobile, pharmaceutical, and semiconductors. Do you think that's something that Trump could confirm this afternoon, possibly?
He'll
Obviously,
definitely
they're
be
all
asked
having
about
good
it.
days.
Yeah, he'll definitely be asked about that if indeed those are not going to be put into place. And so definitely keep an eye out on the auto stocks and the semis around that time if you're trading those, because there might be a headline come across that says Trump denies this or Trump confirms it. If he confirms it, then I think you might see a continued rally in the market. But if he says this report's wrong, then you might see the market reverse pretty quickly. So keep an eye on it at 2 p.m. I think that's going to be a very important time if you're trading. Um, yeah, and also I wanted to mention that the EU accused Apple and Google of violating digital market laws. I don't think Trump is going to take too kindly to this. He's very upset with Europe that they're constantly finding and investigating our technology companies. So this is something I think might be factored in when he does the tariffs on April 2nd. He might factor in, this situation because he feels that they're treating us badly with all these investigations. So that might be a factor going into it as well.
Okay, let me ask you this, Carmine. I'm kind of surprised that the market's acting as positively to some of the stories as they are,
Yeah,
just from the standpoint that if we're looking at the Dirty 15, that looks like the majority of people that we
exactly.
would be putting
Yeah,
reciprocal tariffs on. So are you a little surprised that the
I
market's
am. I
reacting
am.
this
Yeah,
way?
I am. Because you know what, the bottom line is that he never said it one way or another. Like I said, I think it's notable that he hasn't come out and said already that it's fake news, that you got these reports don't know what they're talking about or whatever. But this could all change at 2 p.m. Just be prepared for that. It could all change at 2 p.m. He could come out and say, this is wrong. I'm going to do what I plan to do, or he could confirm it. And if he confirms it, then I think that'll probably justify the move in the market. But if he doesn't, then that's it's something that could reverse things.
So bottom line, 2 p.m., a lot of
Yeah,
headline risk out there for folks.
yeah.
So keep that in mind. Um, Carmen, let me ask you, what's going to be the process for April 2nd then? Is the White House just going to basically put out a couple of orders that are going to have the whole list of tariffs? Is that how
Yeah.
this will unfold?
Yeah, that's what's gonna. So apparently, it's gonna be come from the Commerce Department, and the USTR rep are gonna put out everything on April 2nd. They already initiated the 232 reviews and all that. So on April 2nd, all they gotta do is kind of just release everything out, and we should get at least some clarity about what is going on. Again, it could change, months down the road, but at least I think on April 2nd we'll know what the tariffs are. So, and again, I'm very interested to know what happens to those broad tariffs on Canada and Mexico. Do those like go away, or do those get incorporated somehow into these? Because I doubt that everything's 25% for Canada, as far as reciprocal back, right? There might be some products that are 50, there might be some products that are 10. So it doesn't make sense to have a 25% if you're taxing some products at 50 and some products at 10. So we'll see what happens with that. They could still keep it on, even though it doesn't make any sense. But, we'll see what happens with those.
All right. Let's see. There was a question in the room, Carmine. Trump announced some secondary tariffs on
Yeah, yeah,
countries
oh
that
yeah.
buy Venezuela oil and gas of 25%. Some of the major buyers here, according to our sub Greg K, are China, Spain, and Italy. Any idea what's going on here and how the market should be reacting to these
Yeah,
headlines?
probably a positive for oil, because I think this might choke off some of the oil exports from Venezuela, which would in theory reduce supply. So I think that's why you're seeing a rally in the oil market following that headline. Um, so one of the big buyers, of course, for Venezuelan oil is China. So we have a 20% tariff on China right now. Now he's saying that if any country that does business with Venezuela would face a 25% tariff. So it's just unclear right now. Does that mean that's going to go up to 25 or what? But he said on April 2nd he'll map all that out. So this is something that again we'll have to wait for April 2nd for.
All right. We will keep an eye out on those going forward
He might
too.
be asked about that again at 2 o'clock too. So we'll see.
Okay. We'll be watching that closely. All right. Moving on then from tariffs, Carmine, unless there's anything that we missed.
Oh, just want to mention quickly about Steve Daines' trip to China.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, so he's a Montana senator. He's very pro-Trump, um, like most Republicans are. He went over to China to meet with Premier Li Queen, which is this country's second highest rated official. He met with these folks. They basically talked about the fentanyl problem, and China said, "Well, the fentanyl problem's not really our problem; it's your problem because you have a bunch of addicted people over there." And the Danes pushed back and said, the fentanyl problem is really because China's shipping that to Mexico, and then it's coming back up here. So they went back and forth on that for a while. I think the main point here is that they're trying to set the precedent for a meeting between Trump and Xi, and I wouldn't be surprised if some type of summit takes place over the next few months. Maybe
The
this
birthday
summertime.
summit.
Yeah, another one. It's something similar to the Mar-a-Lago summit that we had in 2017. I think would definitely be in the cards or in the not too distant future. I think that would be a positive if they can continue to talk, and there might be some expectation that the tariffs be reduced or a deal be made or some sort of like that. So we'll see.
All right. Let's see. President Trump nominated Michelle Bowman here for the Federal Reserve's new chair of supervision. Any thoughts behind that? Obviously, one of the things we'll be looking at is Powell's current term as Fed chair. That ends May 2026, so just about a year away from now. He'll still be a governor until January 2028 for what it's worth. But any thoughts on this Bowman appointment? How does it impact regulation around the financials? And do you see this coming in as any bigger impact for the Fed chair down the road?
Yeah, so I think it'll be some, a mild positive for financials. I think she'll be a little less on the regulatory front than most others. I think it's a pretty mainstream pick by Trump here. I don't think it's out of whack, and I think she'll probably fly through confirmation pretty easily. And I think it's kind of a signal that that when it comes up for the Fed chair, that it's not going to be Peter Navarro or somebody like that he picks. It's going to be somebody that's in line with what he wants, in line with what he's thinking, but not somebody that's way outside the mainstream. So I think that's going to be the case because the Senate is very, very much in favor of Fed independence, and they, I don't think, will accept. Even though Trump has a very big iron grip over the Republican Party, I don't think they would accept, somebody that's just basically a lapdog for the White House to lower rates whenever they choose. So I think that this is kind of an indication that that's going to be the case.
All right. So moving on next, let's talk a little bit about the Russia-Ukraine situation and where we stand on that.
Yeah, so Putin had a phone call with President Trump, and he committed to limit Russian attacks on Ukrainian energy assets. So that's kind of like a small part of a ceasefire, so to speak. But obviously, they're still bombing a lot in Ukraine. There were some attacks over a few days ago on Kyiv as well. So, this is a small, very small victory here towards the getting the war to an end. But the White House has said that they were working on a 30-day ceasefire plan with both sides. There have been some meetings over in the Middle East over today with some of Trump's officials. We'll see what happens with this, but I think that Putin is going to kind of delay things as much as possible, right? He's going to try to drag his feet because he thinks he can still win it. He thinks he can win this war, and he's going to try to drag this out as much as possible. So I wouldn't expect him to agree to any type of ceasefire in the near future. I think he's going to just continue to drag this out. Maybe give Trump a little bit of a win here and there to say that they think that, hey, things are going in the right direction. But I think it's going to be a while before the war comes to an end.
All right. Moving along here, then. Uh, Probably should have just kept this in
Yeah,
line, but
yeah,
Powell did mention, or Trump did talk about that he would like to see Powell cutting rates. No surprise there. That's what he's been
right.
looking for since he got into office. So, any thoughts on that development? Anything that caught your attention?
Yeah, I just want to mention this. It's really not surprising. He's basically going to say this after every Fed decision, I think. So, unless they cut rates, and then I think they don't probably say try to
Probably
cut
should
by
have gone
more.
50 instead of 25, right?
Yeah, exactly. So he can't win. If he does 50, he'll say you should have done 75. So,
Right.
either way, there's going to be a tweet. So, but yeah, no surprise here. Powell said it's kind of the base case that the inflation pressures from tariffs will be transitory. I think that's what Trump kind of latched onto right there in his post. He said he used the word transition into the economy. So I think that's kind of what he was latching on to. So, but yeah, no surprise there, and I expect that to continue. But again, I don't expect Powell to be fired or anything like that. But I do expect the tweets to continue.
Now, Powell did have some interesting comments on tariffs as well, too. We talked a lot about this one covering the Fed. Did Trump have anything to say about Powell's comments about that possibly being transitory? Also, I would note, too, Austin Goolsbee had mentioned that, he only saw about 11% of the goods being impacted by tariffs and also thought it was transitory. Has Trump mentioned any of this at all or talked about this?
He hasn't mentioned that specific thing, but he in his Truth Social post about Powell wanting to lower rates, he used the word. He hopes that the tariffs will transition their way to the economy, and it was interesting that he used that word right after Powell said transitory. So, if I guess you could say he mentioned it there, but he didn't directly comment on the transitory comments yet.
All right. Tesla is under attack here. You're seeing it all over on the news. People attacking individual car owners, doxing car owners, and everything. So DOJ is looking to get a little sterner on this. So what's going on with that?
Yeah, DOJ just said they're going to send people up to 10 to 20 years for vandalism against Tesla cars. I'm interested to know. Is this all cars? Why just Tesla cars? What if somebody sets fire to a Ford? Is that are they going to get 20 years too, or just just for Teslas? That's just it's just not consistent, right? So, but yeah, but yeah, they're trying to get more tough because it's become a political flashpoint. You saw Tesla stock, drop precipitously since Trump has been elected, and a lot of this concern about what Doge is doing and the impact on the brand and so forth. You saw Trump try to mitigate this by saying, okay, it was showing off the Teslas on the White House lawn. He's had Commerce Secretary Howard Lutnick make a comment about buying Tesla shares. I mean,
Yeah, is that even legal? Like, I, I
well,
mean, I thought this is why you usually have officials divest their interest. No.
yeah, exactly. I agree with you. I agree with you. I mean, here's a dirty little secret, right? And I'm not trying to be, you know, downplayed in any way, but here's a dirty little secret. When the Congress is controlled by the same party, and when the president has such an iron grip on that party, there's not going to be any investigation into any of this
Right.
stuff, right? So it's just like, okay, so they know that, so they can in 2 years the Democrats, I think, will probably have control of the House. So I think a lot of this stuff will be investigated, and they might have to be a little more careful. But for now, they're like, yeah, it's not going to hurt me. It's not going to hurt our voters. Probably don't really care. So we're going to continue to do it. So that's really how they feel. I'm not saying that's right or wrong, but that's how they feel. So
Yeah, makes sense. Makes sense. All right, Carmine. Moving along here. DoD awarding a new contract to Boeing.
yeah, so the DOGs are to produce what they call the F-47, and you can guess why they came up with the number 47. So,
It wouldn't be 45-47, I suppose, Carmine, huh?
it could have been that too. So, but this is going to be a new fighter jet with stealth capabilities and all kinds of fancy stuff. It was between Boeing and Lockheed Martin, and Boeing got the award there,
Is
and
it because they named it the F-47? Is that how they procured
that might have
this?
been that might have been the case. They're pretty brilliant over there. I mean,
Yeah,
I give them credit if that's what caused the award. Their marketing person should get a nice raise. But
right.
but yeah, but any event, it was positive for Boeing, negative for Lockheed Martin because Lockheed lost out on that contract. So
All right. So there you go. Boeing obviously had a pretty good week last week around this. So, all right, let's take a look at the budget. And obviously got that passed a couple of weeks back, at least a continuing resolution, taking us through to September. Um, what are the next steps on this process then, Carmine? What should we be looking for moving forward?
yeah, so this is Trump's agenda that I want to talk about. So. Uh, Remember a few months back we passed the budget resolution for Trump's agenda, right? That includes the tax cuts, immigration reform, energy, and defense, right? All one big bill. So the Senate wants to change that to make the tax cuts permanent. But so this is a little wonky, so bear with me. The House budget resolution basically said that you could only add the deficit up to 4.5 trillion, right? But the Senate wants to make the tax cuts permanent. But in order to do that, it's going to be more than 4.5 trillion. It's probably going to be like 5 or 6. So what they want to do to mitigate that is they want to say that our current policy baseline is what we have. So and if they succeed in this, then essentially in their mind, just for not in actuality, but in the for purpose of passing the bill, the budget impact for the tax cuts will be zero because it's just current policy that's being extended. So, in order for them to get this approved, they have to ask the Senate parliamentarian for approval for this, right? And if the Senate parliamentarian says
The old Senate parliamentarian, Carmine, the most powerful person in the world, right?
yeah, yeah, exactly. Especially reconciliation bills that require that try to get around the filibuster, right? I mean, if you had a bipartisan bill, you
Who's
wouldn't
the
have to go
current
through the
Senate
filibuster.
parliamentarian? I'm assuming a GOP member since they have control of all three chambers, right?
It was so. I think it's still the person that was Elizabeth McDonough, who was appointed by Harry Reid. So
Oh,
yeah,
wow.
yeah, she's still there. So they're gonna ask. I mean, I think she's been pretty fair. She ruled in some ways that were negative for Democrats in the past, and she ruled some ways that are negative for Republicans. So, we'll see how she rules with this. She
I'd
might
like
say,
to see the house that she lives in. I bet you it's pretty nice.
yeah, pretty. exactly, exactly. But yeah, so the Republicans are going to ask her about this current policy baseline thing, right? Where they basically say that the impact of the deficit zero because everything's we're just extending current policy. We're not changing anything. So she might come back and say, yeah, you guys have a point. That's all good with me. And then if they do that, then they'll be able to make the tax cuts permanent. But if Elizabeth McDonald comes back and says you guys are nuts, you guys can't do that, then they're basically going to have to go back to the House plan where it's just 10 years, right? Either way, I think they'll get something passed, but the Senate wants to try to make it a permanent, and we'll see what happens with that. Um, I think this is going to take a while. I think for this to pass. But I do eventually think that we'll have the tax cuts, we'll have the immigration, we'll have the energy, and we'll have the defense all in one package. Uh, Speaker Johnson wants to get this done by Memorial Day. I think that's a little optimistic. I think my base case, like I said a couple weeks ago, was that I think it's going to be done by before the August recess in July. That's kind of where I would guess that when it's going to be done. But we'll see what happens with that. There's going to be a lot of moving pieces, and this is kind of like one of the first wonky steps. Talking to the Senate parliamentarian, it's going to be one of the first wonky steps to get it done. So, uh, April 1st is a big day for House Republicans because they get two new members replacing Gates and Mike Waltz, who joined the Trump administration. So there's two special elections in Florida on April 1st, and they're very safe Republican seats that Trump won by 30 points. So there's really no threat that a Democrat could win those seats. So they're going to get two new members, and then they'll help Johnson's kind of buffer there to try to get stuff passed. I think so.
All right. Well, from that first process, one of the more interesting aspects, Carmen, we talked a lot about it, was Chuck Schumer voting in favor of the bill, understanding that if he shut down government, that would have given Trump and Musk carte blanche to go through and make cuts wherever they saw fit.
Yep.
Now, obviously, a lot of members in the Democratic Party didn't feel quite the same way. Thought that they should continue to fight. Now, that has led to a little bit of a crisis in terms of Democratic leadership. So, where does Schumer sit right now, and how do you see this playing out moving forward?
Yeah, so I mean the calls are getting a little bit more louder over the last week. You had a couple of representatives clearly saying he wants to step down. You see a lot of the energy on the left side of the political spectrum. The more progressive folks like AOC and Bernie Sanders are drawing big crowds in Colorado for kind of their rallies, and their message, if you listen to their speeches, is we dislike what Republicans are doing, but we also think the Democrats need to fight harder. So that's kind of where all the energy is in the party right now. Chuck
Yeah,
Schumer,
had that AOC Sanders rally. How was that taken? Do you think?
yeah. I mean, Sanders was asked. He was on this week with uh, George Stephanopoulos, and he was asked, uh, if he thinks AOC should primary Chuck Schumer in 2028, and he kind of walked away from the interview, walked out of the interview right after the question, saying he didn't want to answer that. It was kind of a strange thing there, and so he's not really he's keeping his cards close to his vest right now on that. But I think that that's kind of where the energy is, and that's kind of where things are going. Chuck Schumer was asked specifically if he would step down on Meet the Press yesterday, and he said he would not. So, he was also asked, this is kind of similar to what Biden went through, and he didn't step down, and you guys kind of criticized him for that. Isn't this the same thing now for you? And that was it was kind of a really good question by Christopher Walker. I have to give her credit on that one. And he said, no, it's totally different. That this is I'm okay, and we're gonna keep everybody together and so forth. So, but yeah, so it's really politically speaking, it's really reminiscent, I think, of what happened to the Republicans in 2014. You saw this big wave of on the far right kind of gained steam, and then 2 years later, of course, Trump took over the Republican Party, and and changed it, I think, forever. I mean, I think there's still people out there that think Republicans will go back to the Reagan style, Bush style party that they were. I don't think that's ever going to happen, no matter what. But I think, but the point is that these transitions don't happen overnight, or one cycle. They take 5-10 years to happen. So there's a lot of things that could happen in the meantime. But right now, that's kind of where the energy is in the parties on that progressive left. So we'll see what happens as things go into the midterms. I think there's going to be a lot of um, a lot of folks that are running in a lot of these midterm races for the Democrats that are in the vein of AOC and Bernie Sanders. So we'll see what happens.
Somebody's asking me what your thoughts are on Wes Moore moving up the Democratic Party. You have any thoughts there?
Yeah, so he's probably going to occupy the more moderate lane. You have a lot of folks in the Democratic Party, whether it's the Pennsylvania Governor Josh Shapiro, whether you have Kentucky Governor Andy Beshear, and Westmore, I think would be in that same category, kind of the more moderate lane. And then you're going to have folks like J.B. Pritzker of Illinois. You're going to have folks like AOC. I think I think she's going to run for president next cycle. I wouldn't be surprised if she does not challenge Chuck Schumer for the Senate seat. I think that's a good indication that she wants to run for president. But we'll see. I think even if she doesn't run, I think there'll be a few other people that are kind of in her vein that are running. So that's going to be kind of the battle as we get to 2028. Is um, how that splits up. Gavin Newsom, I think, is interesting because he's
I was
trying to.
just going to say, since I was curious that he was a name that you didn't mention, and I would assume at this point he's probably the front runner. No, am I wrong in that, Carmine?
Well, so the polling
Just
says
from the
Harris is the
yeah.
front runner, but I don't think she's going
Okay.
to run. So the reason why I left Newsom out of those two groups is because I think he's trying to straddle both the moderate and the progressive side of the party, right? Because his record in California is very progressive, but over the last few months he's been trying to kind of moderate some of his positions, and I think that I think he's a very good politician. I'm not saying I agree or disagree with what he's saying, but I think he's a very good politician. I think he would be a very good a force within a Democratic primary if he were to run. I think he would have a very good shot at getting a nomination because I think what I've seen, he's been able to kind of straddle both of those sides very well. He's been saying, okay, here I'm kind of with the middle. Here I'm kind of with you guys on the left, and I'm kind of giving everybody a little bit of what they want. And I think that could be a very winning message. So we'll see. But there's gonna be a lot of people running. So
Think there's ever a chance of a third party getting out there, Carmine?
not right now. I mean, I think the parties are too entrenched right now. It's just here's the thing though. Trump has shown that the way to kind of let's say let's say hypothetically speaking, Trump ran as an independent, right? He would have never won. But if he's shown that the way to kind of change um, a party is to kind of take it over and to try to mold it into your vision, right? And I think that there's something very similar to that could happen on the Democratic side, but I just don't think like it's just the way our system is set up. Like in the electoral college, for example, you don't have to get if there's three people running. That whoever gets a plurality of votes doesn't even have to be 50% gets all electoral college votes. So that's really the big impediment to where any independent party would run. I just don't see it happening anytime in the near future.
Okay, fair enough. Any topics that we failed to address here, Carmine, today?
That's pretty much it.
All right. Well, as per usual, thank you very much for coming on here. Obviously, we'll be listening to you closely and for any updates on the tariffs. Next meeting's going to be what, the 31st, right? So that'll be 2 days before Liberation Day there. So should be an interesting time as we get a little bit closer. But definitely appreciate your insight into everything here, Carmine.
Sounds good. Thanks, Kevin. Have a good one.
Okay, talk to you later.